All right. Hey, everybody. This is the Enlightenment Evolution Hour with your host, Rob Gauthier, a.k.a. the E.T. Whisperer. We are here with a very, very special guest. We have Darryl Anka with us, who is the channeler Bashar, the owner of Zia Films. Amazing content. We're going to be talking about disclosure and a lot of other things tonight. Before we jump into that, we need to make a few announcements for the show. First of all, me and Kalina just got back from our Asheville event. It was a 3-day extensive workshop. It went amazing. Everybody who was there, I want to thank you. Everyone who is not there, we should have videos out in the next few weeks. We've already put a couple clips on YouTube, so it will be there for your viewing pleasure very soon. We also wanted to let you guys know about a new guest that will be coming on. We'll be having Brad Johnson, who will be on probably in about 4 or 5 weeks. We also have a couple guests that we're working on now who we're going to be talking about probably next week. So hang in there. If you haven't noticed, we switched venues to Google Hangouts, which is your YouTube Live permanently. As you know, Blog Talk was having a lot of problems and a lot of issues with sound. So we switched over to here. This way you get a more intimate view, a more connected hangout with all of us, and it'll be able to take you guys to being able to access it more easily on playbacks and live. So this will be our new format permanently. We've tried it a few times. It's worked out well. So we want to tell you guys thank you for hanging in there with us for the last couple months on Blog Talk, but we're going to be back in full swing. I also wanted to let you guys know that the first Wednesday of next month, we will be doing the live Q&A channeling with Aridif and Treb, and we'll be taking questions. Now, instead of call-ins like we did for the radio show, we'll have questions on a live chat. If you join us the first Wednesday of next month, Kalina and I will give you all the details as we're going through. I want to get to one more and a big, big, big announcement for us. We just landed a date in October. I believe it is 8th and 9th of this year. We are going to be doing this year's channel panel. It will be an online channel panel. We're going to have 10 to 14 different channelers there, each one of them coming online, having an interactive live conversation with all of you guys. And it'll be a lot like this, where we'll have someone asking your questions that you send in via email or in the chat room, and then they will ask the channeler your questions, and we're going to be doing that on the weekend of Saturday and Sunday, which we believe is the 8th and 9th of October this year. So we're going to start announcing channelers in the next couple weeks for that event. It's going to be an amazing event. Kalina and I will host that as this year's channel panel. And next year, we're probably going to do a live one in New York and LA, but details, we're still working those out too. So we just want to let all of you guys know that that is for sure. And it's going to be the weekend of the 8th and 9th. Or excuse me, the 7th and 8th of October this year. And more details will be on that. As all of you guys know, one-on-one sessions, private sessions, group sessions, things like that, etwhisper.com/bookings. Go there, check it out. But I'm not going to waste any more time with announcements this week because we have a very important guest. And I want to welcome Darryl Anka, Channeler Bashar. It's very, very great to have you here, Daryl.
Thank you, Rob. I appreciate it. Thanks for the opportunity.
Absolutely, and I'm excited for you to be here. We've had an attempt to try to do a show a few times, and we finally got some timing down to do that this time. And I'm really grateful because you're one of the channelers who've been out there, who've paved the ways for other channelers like myself and a lot of people who have just started in the last decade or even longer. You've been out there for 30 years doing your thing, making it easier for people to connect. 33 years, congratulations.
Thank you.
That, how does that feel doing this for 30 years?
Well, it's kind of actually astonishing because certainly I never expected it to go this long. Really had no idea where it was going to go. And in some ways, it's flown by. So, you know, here I am.
Well, it's amazing, 33 years. You know, I wasn't aware of you for the last probably 8 to 10 years was when I found you. Yeah. I checked your work. You were the only person out there who had been connected to ETs that was easily accessible online. Let's draw it back, though, for a minute. For those of you or those of the listeners who might just be aware of you for the first time, which on our channel, we have a lot of channeling people here who love channeling. So everyone who normally listens to us knows who you are. But for someone who might bump into this, can you tell us a little bit about how that process and how that connection got started?
Sure. This began for me back in 1973. I had two very close broad daylight UFO sightings here over Los Angeles, where I live. First time about 150 feet away, the second time only about 70 feet away. Both times, thank goodness, with witnesses. And there was an equilateral black triangular ship about 30 or 40 feet on a side. After having seen something like that, I needed to start investigating what this was all about, because of course I had heard about the idea of UFOs before, but you know, once you see something like that physically, it really completely changes your world, and you start to realize that the world is not exactly just what people have been telling you it is. So I started researching to find out more about what was going on. And over the course of several years, I began investigating other metaphysical concepts, psychic phenomenon, channeling, and so on, that I found in other books, sort of located near the UFO books on the bookshelf. And 10 years after my sightings, I was introduced to a channel who was holding seminars at the time. And after listening to the entity coming through that channel for a few months, I thought, you know, this is very empowering, positive information. There's obviously something going on here that's a little different than someone just talking. And I thought it was, you know, good and helpful information. But eventually the entity offered to teach a channeling class. And I didn't understand how channeling could be taught. I just sort of thought it was something that happened to someone automatically. But I went into the class not thinking I was going to become a channel. I was just continuing my research to find out how channeling could be taught to someone. But the class was basically a series of guided meditations over a 12-week course. And about halfway through the course, when I was in one of those meditative states, I received what I can only sort of describe as an instantaneous telepathic contact, like somebody had just sort of shoved a bunch of information in my head. And I understood in that moment that I had made an agreement to do this in this life with Bashar. I understood that the UFO was shown to me on purpose to get me to start learning what I needed to learn. And the message that was there from Bashar was, now you know it's time to begin this, if this is something you still want to do. So I sort of had to think about this for a minute, because I didn't know if this was just some sort of weird hallucinatory side effect of the meditation or what was going on. But as this was all sort of going on in my head, and remember, this was happening in like a split second, the entity coming through the teacher actually stopped talking to the class and turned right to me and said, there is an entity here for you right now if you're ready to begin. And I also glanced over at one of the classmates sitting behind me and saw that for some reason, somehow, she had picked up on the image of Bashar I saw in my head during that momentary flash, and she was actually sketching it on a piece of paper. So I already had two outside validations that it wasn't just my imagination. So I thought, all right, something's happening here. I'll continue to practice and see where this leads me. So I did well enough in that class that the teacher offered to allow me to co-channel the next class with him. And from that class, I met a woman who was doing the first doctoral thesis on the connection between psychology and channeling, and she needed subjects to study for her paper. So I became one of her subjects. I would go to her house, she would invite her friends over, I would channel for them, and she would take her notes and write her paper. Well, you know, the first week was 5 friends, and then word of mouth started spreading, and the next week was 10, and the next week was 20, and you know, it just started growing. And then we had to do it twice a week, and then we had to start renting auditoriums, and then people were, you know, passing the tapes around, and people in other cities and people in other countries started inviting me to go and channel, and it just kind of one thing led to another, and here I am 33 years later still doing this. So that's kind of in a nutshell how it unfolded for me.
Well, it's amazing to see the energy and the efforts throughout the years. A lot of older materials out there on YouTube and some stuff when from 33 years ago that you watch, and you see the change in your own connection to Bashar, and you see how the information, it's always been a very clear and good connection, but you see how it gets more strong, and kind of both of your consciousnesses meet together, and you can see that melding. It's an experience a lot of channelers and I have talked about at first. It's really a lot of the entity, and then, or it's a lot of you, depending on how well you start, and then it kind of merges. Have you experienced that merging?
Oh, more and more all the time. I mean, Bashar's energy always rubs off on me. I get to become more and more my version of what I imagine him to be, which is kind of the point for the channel anyway, because it's got to help the channel as well as the people that the channel is helping. And, you know, it's, it just becomes more, I'll say, first nature to start thinking like him, because over the years when he describes these concepts that he shares with us and when he describes the things, the way he sees reality, I get to sort of not only see in my head, but feel what they feel about things, how they think about things. And it's a profoundly different way than we think about things. And over time, it just has become more logical to think like they do and to see things the way they do. So it really has become my mode of thinking.
Yeah, and I understand that the more intimate time you spend with an energy that's that powerful and that's that intimately connected with you, it does tend to rub off, and I understand that completely. So you're going through and you're channeling and you're sharing all over the world. What is the one thing that you've seen year after year that remains the same? Because I know when you channel, the energy is different, the people are different. What's the one thing that's remained constant for 33 years in your experience?
The message, the information, the basic fundamental information that Bashar shares with us about how important it is to know yourself, be yourself, follow your passion, and all of that. And of course, you know, there are many different sources that talk about that. The one thing I kind of really appreciate about the way Bashar frames it is he brings it all down to a very grounded kind of toolkit that allows us not just to be left with the saying, but to explain to us how it actually works, what the nature and structure of reality is, and how we can apply these ideas in a tool fashion to actually get some physical benefit from the concepts. And so that's been pretty consistent over 33 years.
All right, and I'm getting you back in my ear, my headphones doing a thing, but can you explain to us what the most common thing or what the most different thing is? You shared a little bit about what's the same. What's the most different that you've noticed in the beginning of your channeling till now?
Well, there's more and more, as I get more used to his energy, there's more and more of his personality that can come through, and there's also more blending in me of becoming, like I said, sort of more my version of him. So there's definitely been a progression of how he's able to express himself, both within me and to other people. It's becoming more fluid, more natural over time. And it's now to the point also where, you know, I recently actually held a class that I'm beginning to teach myself without actually channeling Bashar, which is called One, a Unified Theory of Metaphysics. And it's taking all of Bashar's information and recognizing that there's actually patterns in all the information he's been delivering to us and putting it together in a kind of literally unifying theory that shows how all these concepts are connected and how they're all based on very simple principles. And the class gives people an opportunity to really take the time to investigate these principles deeply and really get used to understanding how to use them and really take time to like get into the details of why does this work and how does this work. Way more time than is available to people in even a private session, let alone a public session. So the ability to be able to express these things myself and to sort of get into a channeling state without it actually necessarily going all the way to channeling him is sort of a new development for me that is definitely the result of having been exposed to his energy for so many years.
So you've always described yourself as a trance channeler. Now this gives you the opportunity.
I actually have not described myself as a trance channeler. Many people have described me that way, but technically speaking, it's not a trance. It's actually a state of heightened brain connectivity and activity. This is kind of one of the things, and I know we'll get to this. You know, we recently completed this documentary about how I became a channel and who Bashar is, called First Contact. And one of the things we did in the documentary was I did a channeling session with my head wired to an EEG machine, because we really wanted to see what is happening in the brain when I go into the channeling state. And we have found, for the first time, real sort of scientific evidence that the channeling state is a true altered state, and there are profound differences going on in the brain when you actually go into the channeling state. So it's a state of heightened activity, for one thing, and that's not the only thing, but it's not technically a trance. It's something that is way above on a much higher vibratory level, and it's called the gamma state. And therefore, we have been able to finally demonstrate that regardless of whether Bashar is real, the channeling state is a true altered state. I'm very excited about presenting that to the public for the first time.
Well, that's something eventually the conversation was leading to, the new documentary. This documentary is about your experience, your personal connection to Bashar, that journey. It's called First Contact. First of all, when is it going to be released to the public?
This September, and then wider in October, as far as we know right now. There will be a few theatrical showings, not many, and then it will be available after that, probably on VOD and DVD.
A lot of people have been highly anticipating that. A lot of people have also started using that energy and comparing it to disclosure itself. That's kind of the whole idea with a lot of people, that this represents one large piece of disclosure.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you're working with that?
Yeah, in part, that's part of what the film is about. Not only did we want to make the film to demystify channeling and present the idea that this is possibly, you know, a contact from an extraterrestrial source, but that its main purpose is to examine what the impact on our society would be to have open contact, and also as a indication that this might be the first, or at least one of the first steps toward open contact with another civilization. So the film was designed to serve sort of all of those purposes. And therefore, with that information getting out there, ideally it will sort of pave the way, at least be one more thing that will help pave the way to disclosure of the fact that these beings already exist.
Well, absolutely. Can you give us a little bit about what your intent was before you started creating this film? Maybe what some new intents were during the creation of, and how it's looking now, maybe things that surprised you in the creating of it.
Yeah, well, I mean, there were quite a few things. I mean, we always had the intention, first and foremost, it's like we knew, well, no one's ever really documented the story of how someone becomes a channel. Now, of course, it's different for everyone. But we just thought, you know, that's a story that just has never been told. And we wanted to have a opportunity to create a media format, like a film that we know reaches more people in a very different kind of a way. And so we wanted to share some of Bashar's information in a new format, basically, that could reach people differently. But I think the idea that came about that was relatively new was just in realizing that this, from Bashar's perspective, is actually one of the tools of first contact in the way that they do things. In any civilization that they begin to form a relationship with, they work with the people to create very specific certain kinds of tools that do increase the probability vibrationally of having contact. So while this may not be the only tool, I do believe that doing a film like this is one of the tools that can help accelerate us toward the day when we can actually have open physical contact with not only Bashar's people, but probably other ETs as well.
Well, absolutely. It makes sense because you're already igniting more excitement in people by the idea of this first contact and how people are connecting to the idea of Bashar and Bashar's race. Bashar and you have talked about connections to other races for a long time. In fact, Bashar predicted before the Phoenix Lights came and talked about that and how it would occur. So all of these energies point that towards that disclosure and kind of the obvious keys of how this dialogue with Bashar, how your creation of this movie can help push contact forward. Has Bashar talked to you, or have you had any insights on what other kind of ways that this will help promote that disclosure?
He doesn't necessarily give us a lot of that indication yet. The only thing he has said is the film in its present form will do the job that it was designed to do. So he's a little bit mysterious about it because I don't think he wants us to see completely behind the curtain yet. But he has assured us that it will have the impact it needs to have. So,
okay, and I know that... Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No. I'm just saying, so in that sense, your guess is as good as ours at the moment as to what it's actually designed to do, because I know it'll work on many different levels. You know, one of the things that often happens when something like this comes out to the public and they see all the things that we actually have in this film is it triggers other people to suddenly come forward and share their experiences. And I know that that's one of the more powerful things that can happen to bring about disclosure, is just seeing how many more people have actually had experiences and how many more are invited or encouraged to come forward and talk about their story because something like this comes out to the public. So it's my hope that it will have that kind of an impact and get people to sort of get it talking about it and make it more public, which I think will certainly help reveal the fact that it's kind of like, what's the phrase? It's like the biggest secret that everyone knows already, right? And just getting them to talk about it and be okay with talking about it and not feel like they're going to get ridiculed and so on and so forth is an important thing. So hopefully the movie will give them the ability to say, okay, I'm not alone. You know, here's this guy who's willing to put this out. So I'm willing to talk about my experiences as well.
Well, the production value of what you've shown on the clip looks great. Gigantic name, James Wood, is
yeah, we were
all
very
of these
fortunate.
people putting their energy.
Yeah, as the narrator, we were really fortunate to get James Woods as a narrator, and he was brilliant. He was great. He really, really, I think, gives the film a little bit more of a gravitas and a seriousness, and so we're very grateful to him for being willing to do that.
Absolutely. It puts gravity behind the energy, the stigma behind channeling. Ever since I've been able to channel, ever since I was aware of channeling, has been, you know, it's here or there, it's good or it's bad, and a lot of people draw back and forth. But like we were talking about before, you have been doing this for a long time. You've paved the way for other channelers, all these people who are new, who are coming in. You know, there are very few people that you can say channeling and there's an automatic association. There's your name, Lee Carroll, you know, all of these great people, Esther Hicks, so on. So you bringing this forward has already kind of put a street out for other channelers to present. Now doing this with a movie and attaching a famous energy behind it, that propels it even more. So I see what you mean. Yeah. Now, you used to work doing special effects, things of that nature, if I'm not mistaken, correct?
Yeah, I started in the film industry doing storyboards, miniature fabrication, set design, production design, things like that. And then eventually switched over to where I am now, where writing, producing, and directing, yeah. So it's now my two, it's like in this movie, my two careers have finally sort of blended, the channeling and the movie making. So I can see sort of the plan behind all that, you know?
Well, that's kind of what I was getting at. You've got both of these passions that you've had in your life for a long time.
Yeah. About the same time.
What do you see moving?
Interesting, because I've been in the film industry just about as long as I've been channeling.
Okay, yeah. See, I wasn't aware of that. I figured you were in the film industry a little further. So what do you see? What's that? I'm sorry.
A little bit, yeah, a little bit longer in the film industry, but I actually did start. Well, and you know, it's a trade-off, because again, I had my UFO sighting before I went into the film industry, but I was in the film industry before I actually officially started channeling publicly. So they kind of like were, you know, one was ahead of the other, and then another one caught up to it. But then when I was really going forward in the film industry is when I really also started my channeling back in the early 80s.
Well, sure, and that makes them both go hand in hand. So if this movie goes out there with the expected energy behind it, as everyone who I've talked to has perceived, as your desire and excitement puts behind it, and it's well received, what's the next step with merging those two passions of yours?
Well, there are certainly other stories to tell. I mean, you know, as a production company, these aren't the only kinds of stories we will tell. And we already have done another movie with from our production company, Zia Films, with my wife, Erica, who's my production partner in the company. And then April is my partner in Bashar Communications, who puts out the information. But we've already done a movie called Dearly Departed, which people can access through our ziafilms.com website. And then, you know, there are other things that we're writing now, that some of which have some metaphysical information, but some of which also go off into a little bit more mainstream things like science fiction and drama. Although a lot of even those have maybe just a touch of a twist to them that gets people to think about things beyond what the movie may immediately apparently be showing them. So, you know, we have a lot of other projects coming down the pike that we're excited about, that we will eventually get out there after this one also is made available to the public.
Absolutely, and that makes sense. Logically put it in a row. My experience with channeling is that it's given me the opportunity to experience things that not a lot of other people get to experience, or
Right.
when they do, it's hard to translate it into words. So I think about, hey,
yeah, very.
Go ahead.
And, yeah, very. It's sometimes very difficult to translate into words, and in fact, that's actually one of the other reasons we're excited about the documentary. Is, you know, when Bashar describes things like what he looks like, what his planet looks like, what his ships look like, I always get to see those in my head. No one else ever gets to see them. So the documentary gave us an opportunity, in working with some very talented special effects people, to generate some computer images that finally let people know what he looks like, what his planet looks like, what his ships look like. And then they can see what I'm seeing in my head when he describes those things. So I'm also very excited about that aspect of the movie.
Yeah, absolutely. You're giving a visual and physical representation to all that energy, and that's kind of what I was feeling and thinking. I've tried to do that through books, but words are very limited things when it comes to the type of energy as it comes to. So you're sharing these experiences. You're getting ready to do this movie. What about events? You said you're teaching these new classes. You've got events that are going on constantly. What kind of work are you doing with Bashar and those types of events lately?
Well, there's new projects that we're discussing, many different ways of repurposing the information that he shared with us to provide all sorts of different avenues for people to access the information in different ways. Now, sorry, I just lost your picture, so I don't know if we're back. Okay. And you can hear me? Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're your picture keeps going in and out, so I'll just ignore that. We're always constantly working with Bashar to come up with new ideas, new ways of presenting the information to people. He just recently, I don't know if you're aware, when we did our Las Vegas event, he just recently shared with us information on a game called Cybo, which is their ancient language word for 13 and transformation and synchronicity. And I believe that either now or within the next week, the instructions for how to play this game will be available to the public. But he was basically describing a game that was created on their planet many thousands of years ago, that actually was designed specifically to help accelerate and increase their experience of synchronicity in their lives. So information like that he is now passing along to us gives people kind of a new sort of active way to get engaged, get involved with his information, his energy, the kind of messages he gives through this and other very specific ways of expressing it that are fun and very different. So in delivering this new game to us, I mean, who knows how far this will go? People will maybe start playing it and start figuring out and experiencing more synchronicity in their lives, which again will help accelerate us toward contact and disclosure and all that. But that's one example of a very unusual approach of taking Bashar's information and presenting it to people in a completely new format that still serves the same purpose.
Absolutely, and that makes sense to put a lot of energy behind those co-creations. I've heard a little bit about it from people who were either at the event or some, but I'm excited to hear about that. Now, I want to change subjects real quick. Something that I've noticed in the channeling community has been about people learning to channel. That's a really huge excitement with a lot of people, and a lot of people kind of make that mistake in their own mind that it's got to be hard, it's got to be difficult, only certain people can do it. But I've noticed a lot of people who have that belief in themselves are actually doing it quite easy. Is there a difference between now and 5 or 10 years ago when channeling has seemed to become easier for people who are just beginning to do it?
Yeah, definitely. Well, I think one of the things that may make it a little bit easier is the fact that Bashar has been very clear about the fact that channeling is a natural altered state, and we actually do it all the time. Anytime you're doing anything you love to do, you're not paying attention to the passage of time, you're in the zone, you're at peak performance, or even in a deep meditative state, you actually are in a channeling state. This, again, is one of the things that we are bringing out in the movie with respect to the fact that I did this EEG test, because what the channeling state is represented by in the brain is what is called the gamma state, and that is anywhere from 40 to 100 cycles per second in terms of how the brain functions. So anytime anyone is doing those kinds of things, they actually go into gamma, and that is the channeling state. So first and foremost, it's a natural state. We all channel from time to time in that way. It's just a matter of what you want to do with it when you're in that state. Some people will do automatic writing. Some people will just simply use it as a way to connect to their higher mind or source or be more creative. Some people will connect to other entities in this way and form a kind of telepathic bond that allows them to bring information through in the way that I do. No one way is better than another. It's up to the person to decide what works best for them. But I've watched the different generations of channels coming up, and I do see that the main pattern is that there is more and more and more conscious awareness of what's going on. Some of the early channels were completely blanked out, and they had no idea what was going on during the channeling. My generation of channels is aware that there's something going on, but we don't really so much pay attention or hear the words. We're having a different kind of a daydream experience or something like that. But more and more new channels are exhibiting what I am now expressing in the class that I talked about, where you become more of a conscious channel. You just know how to get into the state. You receive the information that you need no matter where it's coming from, and it almost doesn't matter where it's coming from. You just get the information, it's downloaded, and you just share it with people in a much more conscious state. And I think that's an indication that we're beginning to realize that this is a natural state for us, and as we evolve, it becomes more and more common to be able to access whatever we need at the moment that we need it. So we're exhibiting more and more of the traits that Bashar himself exhibits, and that, I think, is a natural flow, a natural evolution of the concept of channeling. It's just, we just start to blend with that state and access what we need when we need it, without necessarily needing an intermediary entity in order to do that for us. I think that's the ultimate point that Bashar and other entities are attempting to get across to us.
And it makes sense as a growing of consciousness in the collective base to naturally go that way. Makes sense. Now, I've interviewed dozens of channelers before from all different walks of life, all different generations. And the one question I have to ask every channeler, and it's for my own personal curiosity, not really much more.
Okay.
What is your connection process? How do you get into that state? And when you're experiencing it, I've heard you described that before, but for our listeners, if you could describe what it's like when you get to that state.
Well, when I first started, when I wasn't used to the energy, sometimes there would be different kinds of physical sensations. There would be aches and pains and things like that. Sometimes I would feel like I was coming down with a cold or a flu 24 hours before I would channel. But that didn't last more than a couple of years at the most, because it was just the result of the resistances that were in me to the higher frequency energy, just because of normal beliefs that we pick up here on Earth. Once I started adapting Bashar's information and trusting it more and letting it through more, and also processing my own negative beliefs and letting them go, the energy flowing through me from the channeling didn't meet as much resistance. So it went from being something that was a little bit of a strain to something that actually started uplifting and supporting me. And from that moment forward, now when I do the channeling, it is something that leaves me with more energy than when I began. But I've been doing it now for so long that I can just fall into it when I want to. It's very automatic at this point. I know exactly what it feels like to go into that state. So at this point, there isn't much of a process. It takes me about a minute or two just to let my body relax and to adjust my brain frequency to that level. When I first began, it took a little longer. I was actually going through different processes, like, let your body relax, imagine a blue light for your mind, or a green light for your heart, or a red light for your body, and, relax all these things, and so on and so forth. But different people will use different techniques, and for some people it'll be faster, and some people it'll be slower. But at this point, there's almost nothing I can describe to you other than saying that I just know how to fall into it at this point. It's sort of like, literally like just falling off a log. You just go. In fact, sometimes if on the occasions when I've gone to see other channels and they start going in, I actually have to hold myself out, because the energy is so conducive to pulling me in that I have to purposely say, no, this isn't my channeling. So it's become just completely automatic to me at this point.
I understand completely. Being around that other energy when they're pulling it in, I can understand that completely. When you're in that state, you've described it too as being aware, but not fully aware of what's going on. That's why I refer to it as a trance channeler. Can you describe a little bit more?
Well, for me, it's like falling into an active, dynamic daydream. I'm seeing images, I'm feeling things, I'm getting downloads that work for me, but I don't really hear the translation, because that's on a very secondary level. I know there's something going on, but it might as well be happening in another house, in another place far away. It's sort of similar to the idea, like, if you're lost in a really deep daydream and somebody walks in the room and they're trying to get your attention, but they have to call your name like 3 times or 4 times or 5 times before you actually register that your name is being called. It's like that. I'm so absorbed by what's going on in me and the images I'm seeing and the things I'm experiencing as this symbolic, abstract, sometimes literal, sometimes impressionistic daydream, that I can't pay attention to what is being translated through my brain and turned into language, because that's for the person that he's channeling to. It's not for me. I'm getting what I need in a completely telepathic, different way. So it's kind of like I'm standing in a waterfall that is pounding down on me with energy, and what you're getting is the spray. So I would rather pay attention to the waterfall. I don't need to pay attention to the spray that you're getting.
Okay, that's beautiful. Beautiful way to explain that. You say you're getting what you need to when you're in that.
Always.
Do you notice that since you've connected for much longer, and the longer you connect, the less that you need there when it comes to tune-ups and your own energy or stuff?
Absolutely. Everyone is expected to be able to get to the point where they can do that for themselves. And that's also one of the reasons why, in the channeling state, time is exceedingly collapsed for me. So whatever it is I'm getting doesn't seem like it's happening in all that much time. Anytime I have to kind of guess like how long I've actually been in that state and channeling in any given session, it always feels about like 1/3 of the time that actually has passed for other people. So let's say, you know, if Bashar is talking to somebody for an hour, I'll come out of it and feel like I just went into it about 15 or 20 minutes ago. And so since it's a very collapsed state, I'm getting information in a very accelerated and collapsed way. And that's all I need. So I'm literally experiencing less time than other people by being in that state, because in that state, you're very in the now, you're very in the present. And when you're in the present and it doesn't feel like that much time has passed, according to Bashar, you're actually aging only the amount of time you experience, not the amount of time everyone else is experiencing.
Well, that's why you keep that handsome look on the face, huh?
Now, okay, I'm not bragging, honest. I'm trying not to brag. But over and over and over again, I do find that people are a little bit surprised at my age. They usually tend to guess that I'm about 10 years younger than I am. So it does seem to have an effect.
Was that something you want to share? How old you are?
I'm 64. So
you do look a lot younger. Yeah.
So, you know, it just depends. But I know that the experience is one of less time.
Absolutely, and that makes sense, dealing with that high energy, higher density, dimensional consciousness.
Yeah.
That's another thing too. A lot of people have been exploring lately the construct of the universe, dimensions, densities, and I know Bashar is one of the most intricate channels when it comes to that type of information. Mm-hmm. Is that been simplified in a way that most everyone can understand it? Because a lot of people get into it and they get lost beyond the first few dives in, you know? It's a rough subject for people.
Well, I mean, and Bashar understands that, which is why he's been channeling for so long, because he knows that people need to hear things a couple of times and he needs to give them information from a number of different points of view so that they can really ultimately wrap their minds around it, which is, again, one of the reasons why I started doing the class, to give people more of an opportunity to deeply investigate the nuances of Bashar's information so they can really, really lock it in and make it their own and understand it. The irony is what Bashar is talking about. Of course, I'm saying this now after being exposed to it for 33 years, so it seems obvious and second nature to me, but I understand that for many people it's not. But the irony to me is that the principles are actually exceedingly simple. And I think the greater difficulty people have is that they can't bring themselves to believe that it's actually as simple as Bashar is saying it is. And so I don't know if the difficulty in understanding a lot of the information is actually inherent in the information, or it's inherent in the fact that we just can't bring ourselves to believe that what he's saying is as simple as he's trying to make it. Because it is really simple. The principles are very, very basic and very simple, but they are not the way we're used to seeing things. They're not the way we're used to thinking. So I think that's the transition that needs to be made, is that people need to understand the simplicity of what he's saying and that that's really all there is to it. And yet they're always thinking, well, there must be something more. There's got to be another process he's leaving out. It's about remembering the basic concepts that he's talking about and applying them all at once in your understanding. But what Bashar is attempting to get us to understand is nothing more, really, than just the structure of existence. There is a structure that they can see. So when he's talking to us about all these principles, he's not giving us opinions as much as he's giving us observations of simply literally what he sees when he's looking at the structure of existence. It's like he's just describing a structure. And if we can wrap our minds around the simple nature of the structure, everything else will make sense. That's really the underlying foundation of the unified theory class, is here's the underlying structure. Now compare everything to that. And anything that doesn't fit that simple structure, let it fall away. And whatever's left is all you need to understand. And then you'll get it. So it's a process of simplification, but it's a process of simplifying our thought process so that we can actually see what's there instead of clouding it with a lot of old-fashioned, outdated definitions that really don't work for us and haven't worked for us for thousands of years, but we're still holding on to them. And it's those old-fashioned, outdated definitions that are clouding our ability to understand the true simplicity that underlies the principles. So.
That makes sense. And I found a lot of people who go through the experience of overcomplicating. The way that they finally get to the simplicity is after they've seen all the synchronicities in their life kind of click one after another.
Yeah.
Can you share with us some? Yeah, absolutely. Can you share with us some of the synchronicities that have happened in your life lately? Like maybe when you were in the movies, making the movie, the documentary.
Yeah, in fact, one comes to mind right away. I mean, this was so astounding that it really points out how magical synchronicity can become in one's life when you're really going with the flow of your energy. As I said, we were very, very fortunate to get James Woods, and that happened through its own synchronicity. But before that, we were considering another person, and I'm not going to say who it was, but equally well known in the business. Now, we had literally just been talking about attempting to contact this person's agent to see if they'd be willing to do the narration. And the very next day, a friend of ours said, let's meet for lunch. And she suggested a restaurant I almost never have gone to. Maybe I've gone there once or twice in my life. She suggested this restaurant. So, okay, we're going to meet for lunch. I show up, walk in the door, and literally the person that we were talking about the day before walks toward me and is standing there and saying, oh my God, we were just talking about you and the possibility of talking to you about narrating this movie. I mean, in a city the size of Los Angeles, having never run into this person ever before, a well-known actor, and the very next day after talking about wanting to connect to him, having him literally just walk up in the restaurant as I'm walking in and we're standing 2 feet apart is the most incredible display of synchronicity, certainly one of them that I've ever experienced. And it can continue to be on that level as I'm learning more and more and more.
And I love that you say that I'm learning more and more. A lot of people have that perspective. Channelers are perfect. They can never do anything wrong. What are the lessons that you still learn as you channel and as you go through your experiences?
I think one of the more valuable lessons is, again, the idea of not getting quite so caught up on where the information is coming from as opposed to what the information is. I mean, I say this in the documentary. To me, it's about, does the information work for you? And if it does, use it. And if it doesn't, don't. It's completely up to you. And also in discerning, you know, what the quality of the information is. Is it something that empowers you? Is it something that's positive? Is it something that's integrative and connective? Or is it something controlling and segregational and all of that? You know, you can resonate with whatever it is that you can tell is either positive or negative quite easily. And you don't have to take any information that comes to you from any source. It's really up to you to decide what's true for you at any given moment. And, you know, tomorrow something else may be true, and that's fine. But the bottom line to me is use what works, let go of what doesn't, and that will help you navigate more easily through life in terms of receiving whatever information and guidance that you actually need. And that's what I've
Beautifully said. Yeah, beautifully said. It's something that I think every single person can relate to. And even when we feel like we're doing it well, sometimes we still say, hey, you know, let's grab that old belief and take it out for a ride again, see where it takes us.
Yeah. but that's okay. I mean, I think the other very important thing that I've learned through Bashar's information is that many people, when they, say certain things, oh, well, that's really hard to do. That's going to be next to impossible, blah, 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 blah. They don't hear that they're actually spouting what they believe to be true, and they don't understand that what they're saying is not a fact. It's just a belief. And if they can catch themselves saying those things and understand that they're not facts, they're just what you've been taught to believe is true, then they can understand that a belief can be changed because it isn't a fact. If it's not something that really resonates to your true vibration, it's not a fact. It's just a point of view. And that point of view can be changed. And I think that's another very important thing for people to remember, to catch themselves when they say things like that, because when they say them, they give them this weight, like, oh, well, everyone knows this is true. No, everyone does not. And they need to stop and catch themselves and realize they're not stating a fact. They're just stating an opinion or a belief.
Yeah, that's a beautiful, beautiful sentiment. I want to ask you another question that's a bit off topic, but it's something in my own curiosity. I've heard Bashar talk about reptilians a few times, the idea of negativity. But what about positive-natured extraterrestrial reptilians? Has he ever said anything about the spectrum of beings and the way that not everything in one system can be evil or good? Right. So things like that.
Yeah, he's gone into some of that. He usually does not like to go deeply into it because he knows that people lock on to those negative things and he doesn't want to take them there. But he has said a few things. And I guess the gist of what he has said is, don't get caught up in those ideas because, in a sense, if there are negative entities, that's exactly where they want you to go. So, in other words, the greatest power they have is getting you to believe they actually have power when they don't really, because you have to agree to match whatever frequency is offered to you in order to experience any kind of effect from it. That being said, he has intimated that much of what people say about different alien races, like reptilian and so on and so forth, are more often than not our fear-based interpretation of what we think is going on, because many of these alien races have a quality about them that sort of bubbles our fears up to the surface. And the fear that we're feeling in those moments is more of an sort of a, well, here's an irony, sort of a reptilian brain fight or flight survival mode in us. And we are projecting that onto them because their energy sort of, pulls that from us in a way. It forces things to the surface we may not be ready to face, not ready to integrate, and are afraid to look at. So I think more often than not, there may be some exceptions, but more often than not, Bashar is saying that the fear we feel in some of those instances isn't because there's any real danger from those beings, but they're causing our deep-seated fears to rise to the surface before we're really ready to face them or integrate them. And in fact, they may actually be doing us a service by pointing that out to us so that we can face them and integrate them. For the most part, he's saying you're not really in any danger. And there are more than enough beneficial ETs around to help out with all that stuff. So I guess the bottom line to him is don't focus on the negativity and don't worry about it. Move forward in your life in the most positive way that you can, the most loving way you can, and let everything fall into place and stay in that state, because as he often says, you can't really experience something that you're not the vibration of. So if you remain in a positive state, it's really not possible for anything negative to affect you. And in essence, you kind of become, for lack of a better term, invisible to anything that's negative. So that would be his sort of nutshell advice about all that.
Well, the reason I ask is because a lot of people in my experience in the last 4 years, 5 years, have been experiencing more positive energy reptilian beings. And there's an interpretation, at least in the community in larger part, that there's no such thing as positive reptilians. And that's why I bring that up, my own relationship with positive reptilian energy and other things. I was just wondering if he ever spoke about any specific positive reptilian or reptilianoid beings.
He has briefly, and again, he has said they don't really mean us any harm. But the idea I think that you're describing is interesting, because if over the years you're seeing a shift of more people having a positive experience with them, rather than the idea that the reptilian beings are any different, I think what we're seeing is more integration happening within us, and therefore we're actually more capable of seeing the true relationship and the true energy that has always been there, now that we're no longer as fearful as we were. So I think the change is more in us than in them.
I love that. It's beautifully said. That it helps me rest the subject to bed with a few people who I've talked to about reptilians, and they said they've never heard Bashar or you yourself talk about that subject. So that, again, was my own personal thing.
He has from time to time, but like I said, because he knows that a lot of people automatically attach a negative idea to that, and he doesn't want to take them there, he will usually be very, very cautious about when he brings that up and how he brings that up, because he knows there are people that are like almost chomping at the bit to lock onto it in a negative way, and he simply doesn't prefer to promote that energy.
And that's something I've noticed that I always admire Bashar for, and that says something to you with your alignment of energy for being able to bring a being that's aligned that way in too, is his inability or desire to go into that fear, to go into that fearful based stuff. A lot of people do that and they end up getting twisted up and stuff. I've noticed that there have been a lot less of those people who go to Bashar to ask questions recently. Is that a reason of your alignment or the collective, or kind of both?
Both, I think. I mean, again, you gravitate mostly to what frequency you're on. So I think, yeah, you see less and less and less over time of things that are vibrationally incompatible with you, and more and more and more of the things that are vibrationally compatible with where you're at. It's kind of the analogy Bashar gave back in 2012 of the train station. You know, in the station, all the tracks are next to each other. But when the trains leave the station, the tracks start diverting in different directions. And eventually they get farther and farther and farther apart, to the point where if you want to change trains, it becomes kind of more challenging to do so, because now you have to run farther between the tracks to go from one reality or state of being to another. So he's always encouraging people, it's like, while the tracks are still relatively close, get on the train you want to be on, because ultimately it's going to be more and more challenging to find that, and you're going to be stuck on the train you may not wish to be on.
Yeah, and I've heard that analogy from other people who've quoted Bashar from saying that too, which would lead me to ask you about 2012. It was a big situation, a big energy, and a lot of people had big expectations for 2012 because they were listening to other channelers who said, you're going to step outside and you're going to have rainbows and pineapples and all sorts of great stuff. And they were heartbroken. So how do you heal from that? Those people who are now damaged by channelers, they don't want nothing to do with channelers because of that.
Yeah, I think Bashar's information is very pragmatic on that level. And the first thing he has always said, there's no such thing as a prediction of the future. There is a sensing of the energy that exists at the moment the prediction is made. And by knowing the prediction, that can change the energy. So the idea behind any prediction is, look, here's the energy I'm sensing that has some potential. If the momentum doesn't change, then it may manifest. But if the information goes into you and you change it one way or another by your response or reaction to it, then something else may happen. The idea of prediction is to act as a guiding principle. It's not something that in most cases is set in stone in any way, shape, or form. It's a tool to help us understand the energy that we are in now, and to decide for ourselves what energy do we prefer to have. And it also still involves the idea of a process. And I think that's what most people sort of also recoil from is the idea that they have to go through some kind of process to create an experience of the world that they prefer. But process is what life is all about. That's why we're here, is to go through the experience of change, the experience of discovering, the experience of taking an action that makes a difference. So I do think we are seeing more and more positive changes. If you look for them, I think you can clearly see them. I don't think that means that it's going to happen instantaneously. What's being described are threshold moments where there's a great opportunity in those moments to accelerate your energy in that positive direction. And there may be some individuals who suddenly walk outside and truly do see rainbows. But the idea is that, according to Bashar, you never change the world you're on. There are an infinite number of parallel realities, and when you make a change within yourself, you start shifting to other versions of Earth that are more and more and more representative and reflective of the energy that you have created within your state of being. But the world you were in still exists the way it was. And many people are also judging the change by what it looks like on the outside, instead of understanding that the true measure of change is that you respond differently, even if the outside still looks the same. And I think most people forget that or don't understand that. And that's what causes the delay or the slowdown, is the idea that, well, if I'm different, I'm supposed to see something different outside. Not necessarily. Because if everything is actually, according to Bashar, fundamentally neutral and has no built-in meaning, it shouldn't matter what we're seeing, because that's not the determining factor of the state of being that we choose for ourselves. And when we decide to stay in a positive state of being, no matter what we're seeing, even if it's something we recognize that we don't prefer, staying in a positive state of being doesn't mean that you're condoning that. It means that you can figure out a way to use what you don't prefer in a way that actually serves you in a way that you do prefer. It's about putting a positive meaning to the circumstance so you can get a beneficial effect and act as a living example to others of how they can transform that energy from negative to positive as well. So when people say, well, if I'm really different, I should be seeing something outside, are still making the idea of their change conditional on what they're seeing around them, instead of simply saying, this is the state of being I choose no matter what's going on around me, because I know that what's going on around me is not what determines what state of being I prefer. And when you then do that, then you're proving that you've changed, because it doesn't matter what the outside looks like. And the irony and the paradox is that when you don't need the outside to change, you have changed, and the outside will probably reflect it. But you can't do it because you need the outside to change. Otherwise, you're making it conditional, and that simply means you haven't changed. Therefore, you won't see the change on the outside. So,
well, do you think that's kind of what that letdown was about for a lot of people, was to teach them to start creating their own reality instead of allowing others to create it for them?
Yes, exactly. And to also let go of the insistence and the expectation that things have to look a certain way in order for you to experience an absolutely ecstatic life. It's not based on what the outside is. It's based on the changes you make within yourself. So I think there are valuable lessons in that experience for everyone if they understand how to see it, instead of continuing to get caught up in the old-fashioned definitions of what a transformation is supposed to look like.
Absolutely. It's getting, we're at the point where we're a little over an hour, and before we end up calling a night, I wanted you to be able to share anything else, not just about the movie, but anything else about your experience with Bashar and doing this work that you really want to share, anything that you feel is relevant.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'll get the movie stuff out of the way then first. People that want more information about First Contact can go to whatisfirstcontact.com. When the movie is coming out, all the information about buying tickets and the release of it on VOD and DVD will be there. So whatisfirstcontact.com is where you can go to find that out. I think the thing that's most important, as I said sort of in the beginning, is it's very important to remember that the formula that Bashar gives us about following your excitement has 3 parts. Many people conveniently forget the third part. The first part, follow your excitement to the best of your ability. That's the second part, to the best that you are able. If you're not able, then find another path or find some other way to follow your excitement. But the third part is you have to act on your highest excitement to the best of your ability with absolutely zero insistence on what you think the outcome should look like. That when people start to understand that their insistence on a particular outcome is actually a limitation on what the outcome could be, then they'll start letting go of that. It's just that the ego thinks that the idea it's come up with for what represents the best possible outcome is in fact the best thing that could happen. But the physical mind is very limited in what it can actually imagine. And the higher mind is capable of imagining much, much more. So it's all well and good to have a visualization as a symbol of what represents the idea of the ideal outcome. But as soon as the symbol gets you pumped up and excited, you need to drop the symbol and just stay in the state of excitement and let the higher mind bring you what is actually representative of that state, which in fact could be many times greater than your physical mind was actually capable of imagining. So when people wrap their minds around the idea that insistence is actually a limitation and not actually a control mechanism or a guarantee, I think they will start to drop it. But I think the most important thing is a very old adage that's been around for thousands and thousands of years, is to know yourself. You have to know thyself. You have to really be honest within yourself about what it is you believe to be true. You have to have the discernment to tell the difference between real excitement and anxiety that's disguised as excitement because you're afraid to look at something within yourself and you want to gloss it over. You have to have a really precise microscope to look within yourself, be honest about what you're experiencing, and acknowledge it completely, negative or positive, because that's the only way it's going to change. Because as Bashar has often said, you cannot change what you're not willing to own. So the first step is acknowledging what is there, and then beginning the journey of finding out whether what's there is something you prefer. And if it's not, let it go. Because if it doesn't align with your energy, it really doesn't belong to you. And there's no reason to carry around things that belong to other people. The toughest thing, the hardest thing you can possibly do in life, from my point of view, is try to be someone you're not. Being who you are and knowing who you are and being true to that is the most important thing you can do in this life. And that's my opinion.
Oh, it's a beautiful opinion, and it works too on not just energetic levels of the mind, heart, and everything in between. People are going to be interested in taking that class you were talking about earlier, where you take Bashar's teachings and kind of bring them. How do people join up for that? Do you still have room for classes?
I'll be doing it again in 2017. And the way they can find about the class or anything that has to do with Bashar information is simply to go to bashar.org. It'll be announced there, and every event that we're doing will be announced there.
Well, I want to tell you from the bottom of my heart, in my opinion, you're one of the great channelers of all times. You've been able to really bring forward cutting edge information and really help pave ways for all of us channelers who've come up behind you. You're actually a funny story. My fiance and partner, Kalina, we met through a comment section on one of your videos after I had been channeling for a couple years. And then she came over to my channel and then we started talking. That's how I met her. So you are responsible as a part co-creator of my fiance's experience. So thank you for that.
Any part of anything like that. Thank you so much. And really thank you for providing these this opportunity. I really appreciate it. And most of all, thank you for following your own passion. That's the most important thing.
Thank you, brother. I appreciate it very much. From the bottom of my heart, I'm glad to have spoken to you, and good luck with your movie, and I'm definitely going to be coming to see it.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Have a great night. And to everyone, thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Daryl. I appreciate it. All right, everybody, that's Darryl Anka, Bashar.org. Go out, grab the movie, check out all the information there. Also, we are going to be doing the channel panel on the 8th and 9th of October. It will be an online. Everyone in the world, you can sit in your living room, in your underwear, drinking a coffee, watching the channel panel. 10 to 14 channelers from across the world, a huge spectrum. I'm the only one who's coming for sure right now, but we'll have a list of those channelers out in the week. So check out on etwhisper.com/channel panel. Go there. All the information will be there in the next few weeks. And the more we get channelers, the more we'll let you know. The first Wednesday of next month, we are going to be doing the question and answer with Treb and Aridif. You call in, you type the question down. You can ask Treb or Aridif anything you want. And that will be next Friday, or not next Friday, but the Friday after, which is the first Wednesday after, which will be the first Wednesday of July. That's 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 6 p.m. Pacific Time. Thank all of you guys for joining the Enlightenment Evolution Hour on its new venue, Google Hangouts and YouTube. We are so, so grateful to have all of you guys here. Thank you again, Darryl Anka, for all you do for everyone. We love you guys very much. I'm going to jump off. We jumped off a little early tonight because of the thunderstorm/tornadoes that's ripping through Michigan. We've got some high winds outside, so I'd rather go off greeting all of you and telling you I love you than getting forced off by the weather. Love you guys very much. We'll see you 2 Wednesdays for the Treb and Aridif question and answer. Love you guys. Bye.